As I look towards next August, I think it's important to keep in mind our theme for today and our theme for our convening, a call to conscience, defending freedom and human rights. When we talk about human rights and climate change, we're talking about something that civil society groups have been fighting for over a decade, the human right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. According to the World Health Organization, roughly 13.7 million deaths a year, or 24% of all global deaths, are linked to the environment. And every year, over 200 environmental defenders are killed. And everyone on Earth stands to be negatively impacted by the triple planetary crisis that we face. To quote the Parliament's turning point statement that you might see later, time is up for doing too little or for doing nothing at all. For over a decade, civil society organizations from youth groups, national human rights institutions, Indigenous peoples organizations, interfaith groups, businesses, and more have been petitioning the UN to formalize the human right to a healthy, clean, and sustainable environment. Already, this right is cemented in the constitutions of over 100 states, including India and Norway, and even here in the Constitution of the state of New York. But international recognition at the UN was slower in coming. Last October, Costa Rica, Morocco, the Maldives, Slovenia, and Switzerland proposed language formally recognizing this right to the UN Human Rights Council, and it passed, with 43 states in support. There were a few problems, though, namely China, India, Russia, and Japan abstaining from this resolution. When the resolution passed, High Commissioner Michelle Bachelet stated, "We must build on this momentum to move beyond the false separation of environmental action and protection of human rights. It is all too clear that neither goal can be achieved without the other." Along with this resolution, the UN voted the same day to establish a special rapporteur dedicated to human rights and climate change. These resolutions were monumental, historic steps forward, but they were far from doing all that needed to be done. From there, it needed to go before the entire General Assembly of the UN, where every member state would have the opportunity to vote on the international recognition of this right. And I'd like to share some important aspects of this bill, which really take into account the full scale of the climate crisis. This resolution recognizes that the impact of climate change, the unsustainable management and use of natural resources, the pollution of air, land, and water, the unsound management of chemicals and waste, and the resulting loss of biodiversity and the decline in services provided by the ecosystem interfere with the enjoyment of a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. It recognizes that while the human rights implications of environmental damage are felt by individuals and communities around the world, the consequences are felt most acutely by women and girls and those segments of the population that are already in vulnerable situations, including Indigenous peoples, children, older persons, and persons with disabilities. It recognizes the importance of gender equality, gender-responsive action to address climate change and environmental degradation, the empowerment, leadership, decision-making, and full, equal, and meaningful participation of women and girls, and the role that women play as managers, leaders, and defenders of natural resources and agents of change and safeguarding the environment. And it reaffirms that states have the obligation to respect, protect, and promote human rights, including in all actions undertaken to address environmental challenges, and to take measures to protect the human rights of all, as recognized in different international instruments, and that the additional measures should be taken for those who are particularly vulnerable to environmental degradation. As civil society groups prepare to rally around this General Assembly bill, everyone's minds sort of traveled to the last time the UN recognized a new human right. In 2010, the UN passed a resolution on the human right to water and sanitation, with 122 states in favor and 41 abstaining. This was how we would measure the success of this new resolution. It was understood that it would likely pass, but the question was, how strong would the support be? Without a strong international call to action, the right would be recognized, but there would be little momentum for the actual implementation of it. So that left a clear but labor-intensive path forward for civil society. So a group of us met bi-weekly and corresponded pretty much hourly on which states we could sway, because we needed to ensure that the resolution had as many co-sponsors and yeses as possible and as little opposition. But there were many obstacles in the way. By the time the resolution's language was ready to go before the General Assembly, it was late July, and some states had already left New York for the intercession break, and they wouldn't be there for the vote. States like the US and the UK were arguing over the language of certain small clauses, such as one addressing principles of international law, and certain states like Russia were threatening to vote no altogether. So those with specific contacts and embassies reached out directly, urging states to co-sponsor or at least vote yes. And we kept this very confusing running sheet in Excel of all the member states' positions and who we thought we could contact. And in these meetings with us were the current UN Rapporteur on Human Rights and the Environment, David Boyd, and his predecessor, John Knox, along with representatives of dozens of civil society groups. And I spent the better part of a week, along with several members of our task force, writing individual letters to over 180 member states asking for their support on the bill. We asked the US to accept the proposed language instead of calling for changes. We asked for Japan and India to change their positions from their previous bill and vote yes. And we asked states like Liechtenstein to co-sponsor. And then on July 28th, the vote came. And there were over 100 co-sponsors of the bill, 161 states in favor, no opposition, and 8 abstaining. And Japan and India voted yes after all. This moment was beyond historic. The human right to a healthy, clean, and sustainable environment passed with more support than the resolution on the human right to water. Inger Anderson, the executive director of UNEP, said, "This resolution sends a message that nobody can take nature, clean air, water, or a stable climate away from us, at least not without a fight." The final language of the operating paragraphs of the resolution read, 1, recognizes the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment as a human right. 2, notes that the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment is related to other rights and existing international law. 3, affirms that the promotion of the human right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment requires the full implementation of the multilateral environmental agreements under the principles of international environmental law. And 4, calls upon states, international organizations, business enterprises, and other relevant stakeholders to adopt policies to enhance international cooperation, strengthen capacity building, and continue to share good practices in order to scale up efforts to ensure a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment for all. So we all watched the live stream vote for our computers and we celebrated at our desks, smiling, but knowing the work was only beginning, because now comes the time to actually implement this right. This resolution is not legally binding on the 193 UN member states, but it will prompt countries to enshrine the right in their own constitutions, encourage its implementation, and provide the status of human rights defenders to those who are killed while advocating for the environment. The General Assembly action will raise ambition for its implementation, increase momentum, and build consciousness of environmental justice. It will also help establish a global ethic to ensure a sustainable world for all, with justice and accountability, as the ethics of the world's religious traditions agree on the basic right to a healthy environment. As we move forward, the Parliament believes that faith voices will be the crucial drivers of this change. As historically important as this recognition by the UNGA is, the realization of this right now becomes the responsibility of all of us. Thank you.